Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the council meeting for the Township of Otonabee-South Monaghan on April 25th. I will call the meeting to order at exactly 5 o'clock. We do begin our council meetings by reciting the land recognition. We take, each council member has the privilege of reading at successive turns, and tonight I will ask Councillor Allen to recite the land recognition.
Good evening, Mayor Taylor. I do not have the agenda before me tonight, so I don't have it in front of me. I'm having technical difficulties, so I could ask.
Okay, no problem. How about if we just, I guess alphabetically, next would be Deputy Mayor Clark. Bonnie, could you read it tonight and then Mark can read it next week?
Certainly. So I will start off with our land recognition. We would like to begin by acknowledging the Township of Otonabee-South Monaghan is located on the traditional treaty of the Mississauga peoples. These are Treaty 20 and Williams Treaties lands. We encourage everyone to educate themselves on the details of these documents and the influence of First Nations in Canada's history. The Council of Otonabee-South Monaghan recognize these contributions and commit to actions which demonstrate respect for the environment and, in keeping with First Nation tradition, reflects the security of the next 7 generations. Miigwech.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Okay, I don't really have any announcements for tonight's meeting. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest or any of the issues we'll be dealing with tonight? Seeing no disclosures, we'll move down to the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, I'd like a motion, please, that we adopt tonight's agenda for this meeting. So Councillor Howie, Councillor Powers, all in favor? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, moving right down now to on the agenda comes our notice of motion. And I'm sure council will have read that there is a staff report coming regarding this. So I'll turn it over to Deputy Mayor Clark and she can.
Yes, this was my motion. And when I reached out to staff, we had picked the month of May. We're very close. So I just want to thank staff for coming back so quickly with this and meeting more than that deadline. So thank you, staff. And since the concern of the motion has been addressed under our report back 12.1, I will withdraw the motion at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The records will show the notice of motion is withdrawn. Okay, delegations. We have one tonight. And council, we anticipate this to take quite some time, which is the reason for our early start. I'm not going to hold Kent to the usual 10-minute presentation. And after, I'm sure we'll have a very engaged discussion between our staff, our planning consultant, and you'll notice that the county planners are on this call or on this meeting as well, because Holden and Ian Mudd will be available to answer any questions from the county perspective, if that is necessary. Welcome, Ian and Keziah. Nice to see you virtually, and thank you for attending the meeting tonight.
Thank you for the invite.
So Kent, I'll turn it over to you. You can present the report and we'll get started.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Taylor, and good evening, everyone. So we're pleased to be providing this to council tonight for discussion. As council's aware, council did vote in favor on March 7th to continue the process of integrating the township's official plan responsibilities, or the township official plan, into the new draft County of Peterborough official plan, which is, of course, in its draft form, making its way through the public consultation process with an expected adoption sometime in the summer. So in our capacity as the consulting planners and in consultation or in working with staff, of course, we wanted to look over the current official plan policy. So the current Otonabee-South Monaghan official plan and compare it against the draft county Peterborough official plan to ensure that the policies, the goals and objectives, and everything that the township has worked on over these years in terms of township specific policies, things that the township wants to see happen in OSM, specific to OSM, are reflected in the new county Peterborough official plan. And to the credit of county staff, of course, Ian and Keziah are more than willing to discuss and help us to do this and to have specific policies within the new OP, the county OP. So what this all means is that what we're trying to do is find where there may be some inconsistencies with the two documents. So, of course, the township official plan is Township of Otonabee-South Monaghan official plan is a very fulsome document. It's very there's a lot of policy in there. As I said, developed over many years, through different councils of the day, updated, consolidated, etc. And our goal was to comb through that plan and try to find where there were any discrepancies between that plan and what the county is proposing with the new draft official plan. As Ian and Keziah have described in past council meetings or discussed at past council meetings, that the county official plan has a number of policies that are local plan policies, but they're fairly universal. A lot of them are universal, and that's obviously in an effort to streamline that document as much as possible. So there are land use designations that apply to all of the lower tier municipalities, and are sort of the standard land use designations, the standard policies that apply across the board. But there are also township or locally specific policies. And what we want to do is figure out where, the OSM locally specific policies, what those should be, how those should be reflected in the new plan. And where we may have township specific policies that are not necessarily, don't necessarily align with the new draft OP policies, where we could simply just say, let's allow those draft OP, county OP policies to simply just come into effect and override what we've had in the past, because they may not be necessary moving forward, or they may not make any sense moving forward. So this process does provide us an opportunity to ensure that we have, moving forward, township specific policies, but also it provides us an opportunity to kind of look back at some of these policies and determine if it's even worth having them, in the new draft OP moving forward. So it's a good opportunity to kind of to allow us to look back and look at these things. So what we're providing tonight, of course, is a report that provides an overview of where these discrepancies lie, or what we have found in terms of policies that don't necessarily align, or policies that are just specific that haven't been accounted for in the new draft OP. And we're providing this information, of course, with council's approval to send on to the county for integration into the new draft OP. And of course, it's not necessarily that this would be the final, the final contribution from OSM's point of view. There's still time, of course, to refine policies, in the draft OP as we move forward, and of course, still time to refine those policies as they relate to the township of OSM. So, as you'll note, there was with the report, there was a table that outlined all the different specific sections that we had noted that perhaps weren't necessarily in alignment with the county. And when I say, I use these words, alignment or discrepancy, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're, completely in different worlds. It just simply means that there might need some tightening up, or there may be areas where we do need to actually have something that is specific to the township. And just briefly before I go into to some of the topics, the way that we're looking at it in terms of what the township specific policies is that we would have there be a notwithstanding clause or notwithstanding policy that would say, okay, here's the general policy for each of the individual townships. Notwithstanding this, in the township of Otonabee-South Monaghan, here are our policies. In some form or another, in that manner. So I guess what I can do is perhaps I'll go through each of these topics. Would you like me, Mayor Taylor, to go through each of these topics, or would you, or should we have a discussion now? I'm not sure how you'd want to.
I think, Kent, I think the way to approach this is to go through your report and cover each category or each topic, as you say. Okay. And at the end, we'll open it up for questions. And I know that there will be some. There'll be a lot of discussion on some of them. You have some of you recommended no change, and others you have. So
right,
anticipate some talk. But I think go through the report, and then we'll get back to you. Okay.
Okay, that sounds good, Mr. Mayor. And yeah, I don't want to, as you said, you're going to allow me to go over the 10 minutes. I don't necessarily want to drone on because I can do that. So, but I'll, since you provide me the latitude, that's all I need. So I can.
Some, but I didn't mean you had to on either. So.
All right. Okay, thank you. Item one that we've got on here, and this is sort of a major topic, is our on-farm diversified uses, and the county does have on-farm diversified use policies in their OP. They're good policies, and they do provide some flexibility. There are a few minor discrepancies or maybe, I guess, inconsistencies between the county policies and our policies. As council may recall, through OPA number 9, we've amended the township OP, and the policies that we introduced into the township OP were fairly extensive. There was a lot of requirements for new on-farm diversified uses, requirements in terms of how, if someone were bringing forward a proposal for an on-farm diversified use, here are the items that they would be required to provide to the township. And the purpose of this was to allow the greatest amount of flexibility as possible, and provide the township or provide applicants with flexibility when they were coming in, that they wouldn't necessarily have to, if there was something that they were thinking of and something that maybe we hadn't necessarily contemplated as an on-farm diversified use, they could be allowed to do it, provided they met, the number of requirements that we had laid out. So, and I think given the amount of time and effort that went into OPA number 9, it is our position that we would include the policies of OPA number 9 as a separate specific township policy in the new draft county official plan. And then, so moving on to the cannabis production and processing, similar to on-farm diversified uses, the county was very much it's similar alignment in terms of what we're looking at from a policy perspective in the draft county OP. However, we have our own specific. There was these specific OSM policies that we had refined and gone through the process of refining and ensuring that it reflected what council and what the public wanted to see in terms of cannabis production and processing. So that also is another policy section that we would like to, or are recommending that would be included in the draft OP as a township specific separate township specific policy. And then moving on to secondary units, or additional dwelling units as they're referred to in the county OP. This was a township initiative that we had taken up in terms of the township doing its own OPA to permit additional dwelling units or secondary dwelling units. However, in this case, the policies are nearly identical. They're very, very similar. Well, when it comes to something like additional dwelling units, really the specificity lies in the zoning. It lies in the zoning provisions that the township, any individual township would have. When we introduced the OPA in the zoning for secondary dwelling units, the OPA was fairly general in terms of this is what needs to happen for an additional dwelling or a secondary dwelling unit to be permitted. However, the specific provisions will be found in the implementing zoning bylaw. So, I think the township specific flavor to all this is found in the zoning bylaw and not necessarily the OPA. So, from our perspective, we are recommending that the township not have anything specific to OSM, or that the draft OP not have anything specific to OSM as it relates to secondary or additional dwelling units. Same goes for home-based business. Now, home-based business was tied to the on-farm diversified use amendment that was adopted and approved. However, when it comes to the home-based business policies, specifically from the county OP, they align almost identically with what we have in the township OP. So again, as with the secondary suites or the additional units, we don't see any purpose of having specific townships policies in the draft county OP. Item 5 relates to major land use or infrastructure policies. So there's a fairly extensive section in the current township official plan that speaks to major land use or infrastructure policies. We had discussions with the county about the origins of these policies. Really, it's a list of requirements if someone were to propose an airport or a shopping center or a large scale development, and it essentially just it's a checklist of requirements for a use of that extent or that size. When it comes down to it, the draft county OP provides plenty of control from the township's perspective when it comes to an application of that nature. The way that I've read it, or that we've read it, is that a lot of this was related to the airport or to major infrastructure like the Peterborough, the city and county landfill, things like that, and then it kind of expanded to become more and include other sort of large scale, large format retail, commercial uses, and things like that. All of those types of uses are required to provide appropriate technical supporting documents, so supporting technical documents with any submission, right? So they have to demonstrate no negative impact to adjacent land uses, appropriate setback distances from sensitive land uses, and things like that. And all of that's built into the draft county OP. All of that's built into the provincial policy as well. The provincial policy statement's pretty clear with that. So we don't see that as being an imperative policy to carry over into the new draft county OP. So we are recommending that no action be taken on that item. Next one is related to resort commercial. There were just some specific requirements in the township OP related to new resort development. Things like RV parks or recreational resorts and things like that. one of the requirements in the township OP was that there be an OPA required if park model trailers were proposed, and I believe that just relates to previous applications that have come through in the past in the township. There isn't any equivalent requirement in the draft county OP as it relates to park model trailers. We don't necessarily see that as something that's necessary as far as plan, is rooted in any sort of planning basis. It's not necessarily rooted in any planning basis. Certainly, if someone were to move forward with an application like that, where they needed to redesignate lands to the what would be the resort commercial designation in the draft county OP, they would be required to go through an OPA, official plan amendment. There's certainly requirements. There would be requirements for zoning bylaw amendments, site plan approval, things like that, where really when we're going, I guess to back it up a bit, when I'm talking about these requirements for OPA or requirements to provide technical justification, that is always on our mind when any sort of planning applications are coming to the township. So if someone is applying for a zoning bylaw amendment application, site plan approval, we are going to be asking for those things, and the policy requires us to ask for those things. It's not necessary, or we don't believe it's necessary to add in any sort of additional requirements for amendments when really the requirements that are associated with that are ingrained in the planning processes anyway. So there's no requirement, as I said, in the draft county OP for that park model OPA, and it's our opinion that it's not necessary to include that. The draft county OP does have a requirement for a minimum of 5% of the resort space be dedicated to recreational amenities, so amenity space, and it's something that we generally agree with. Our initial thought was that we would like to see that a little more flexibility in the language in terms of that requirement, that it would be at the discretion of council. It's something that we've requested of the county, and they seem to be agreeable to that. So really, they're small changes, small discrepancies, but I think worth noting nonetheless. The next topic was the urban fringe. As it stands now, the draft county OP doesn't contain the urban fringe policies that the current township OP has. I know from discussions with the county, that was something that the TAC, or the Technical Advisory Committee, had discussed at length about removing, and that most of the townships were, the member municipalities or the lower tier municipalities were in agreement that any urban fringe policies would be removed from the county OP. We would still like to see something in there as it relates to Cold Springs. There are currently urban fringe policies in the township OP related to Cold Springs, and they specifically speak to potential employment areas and transportation routes and things like that. And then there's also some language about the city of Peterborough lands that were annexed some time ago, and how that potential development relates to the lands in the urban fringe. So we still think that there should be something in the draft OP related to those lands. However, I think at this point, with, of course, the city's official plan coming into effect soon, that there could be an opportunity at this point for the township to actually update those policies, those township specific policies, for inclusion within the draft county official plan. So it may not take the same form as what it is now in the township OP, and it could potentially be something slightly different And that's certainly something that we would like to work on with the county and of course with council's consideration as well. Then the hamlet policies. So I'll just briefly go over those. We've got there are some slight differences in the hamlet policies, and of course, I think a lot of this owes to the fact that the township hamlet policies are fairly extensive, and that's simply because all the township has is hamlets. You know, we don't have fully serviced urban settlement areas, so it's obviously the places like Keene and Stewart Hall are important. You know, this is where we're going to see, or the township wants to see most of its development occur in those settlement areas. And so there's a lot of there's extensive language in the hamlet policies related to development in those areas. And we don't necessarily see an issue with the way that the hamlet policies are written now in the draft county OP. And I would also point out that there are specific policies for Lang and Keene that are already in the county OP that they've already included, because those are site-specific policy areas and not just strictly hamlet designated areas. They are site-specific areas, so there are specific policies related to those hamlets. However, we don't necessarily see any advantage to providing the extent of the language that's been provided in the township OP. However, there are some policies in the township official plan, current township official plan, related to parkland dedication, and they specifically reference possible expansions to recreational facilities in Keene, providing new facilities in Baileyboro and Stewart Hall. And we do think that those policies should remain or should be present in the draft county OP, as they are important for determining how parkland dedication is going to be allocated, whether if it's cash in lieu payment, where that should be going to. So we have recommended that draft OP include those policies specifically in the hamlet designation. And then the hamlet consent policies, the township OP allows for up to 5 severances in the hamlet. The county OP, the draft county OP, allows up to 4 severances in the hamlet. And from our discussions with the county, it's understood that this is something that the technical advisory committee had reviewed quite extensively. We don't necessarily see an issue with that. You know, once you get to that level, particularly in unserviced settlement areas, well, partially serviced settlement areas like Keene and Stewart Hall, there's technical, not issues, but there are things that need to be reviewed once you get up above the 3 or 4 lot mark. And so I think that dropping that from 5 to 4 is probably appropriate, and particularly given the limitations of servicing in our settlement areas and OSM settlement areas. And then another aspect to that is that the township OP currently has requirements for water capacity studies or a hydrogeological assessment when consents are applied for. And the first one related to water capacity studies, the township OP says that a water capacity study may be required in Stewart Hall and Keene, of course. Water capacity study may be required with a consent application. We'd like to change that to shall, because we want to ensure that that there is capacity in those systems when a future severance is coming forward. The may language maybe provides it's not definitive enough, and it maybe gives the wrong impression. And certainly if someone is coming forward, an applicant, and we don't ask for it from them, you know, who's to say that the next applicant is going to say the same thing? Well, it says may here. Why are you asking me and not him? So I think that it's important. Those slight tweaks are important. And as I said, this is an opportunity not just for us to carry these policies over, but to also improve them. So that's something that we are recommending, that language be tweaked, it be included in the draft OP, but it be tweaked so that we are requiring that with every 7th application. And then also that a hydrogeological assessment is required after when there are more than 3 lots proposed. And then we have rural consent policies. So consent in the rural areas, as council is aware, landowners are eligible landowners may have a maximum of 2 severances in the rural designation. However, each of those severances has to occur 5 years. The second one has to occur 5 years after the first one has been granted. We're not necessarily sure. I'm sure that some members of council may have an understanding as to where that the origin of that. I've never understood it fully from a planning perspective. We don't necessarily see see why it should be required. There is no equivalent requirement in the draft OP. It would be our recommendation that they're not be included, that specific policy not be included in the draft OP. That could be something that, of course, council may have a different opinion on, and we're happy to discuss. But that is what we would be recommending from the rural severance perspective. The existing residential designation that's a designation in the township OP that really is just it's not a it's kind of an antiquated designation. It's not something that is really necessary in today's policy context. We have consent policies, we have rural settlement or hamlet policies, we have rural policies. All of these things provide for appropriate development in rural areas, even where there is existing rural residential development. So our recommendation is that we can, and the county has done this in their draft OP, they've removed any existing residential designations throughout the county and the lower tier municipalities. And it's one of those things that we believe is not necessary moving forward for the township. And then briefly, I'll just cover these two at once because they're kind of related. It's community improvement project area criteria and temporary use bylaws. Just those are typical policies that should be included in an OP, and they're in the township OP currently, and they weren't in the draft county OP, and county staff are certainly open to including them, and I can't speak on their behalf, but they will likely include something to that effect. So I think that covers the township's point of view when it comes to CIP areas and temporary use bylaws. So I believe that covers everything that I have in the report. I didn't go into too much detail in terms of each item in the table. There was a lot of stuff to cover, but I hope that summarized it sufficiently. And I guess at this point, Mayor Taylor, I'm happy to answer. And of course, we also have Ian and Keziah, Ken as well, who helped me with the table. So we're happy to answer questions and whatever questions you have and have a discussion.
Thank you, Kent. It's quite obvious. There's been a lot of work, a lot of thought gone into this as well. There should. It's an important document, and I'm pleased to see that level of detail has gone into the report. But what I'd ask members of council, I'm sure most, if not all, have questions. If you'd use the little hand function, I can see it easier to see who wants to ask a question and in the proper order. Certainly, you won't be limited to 1 or 2 questions on this particular issue. So is there anybody want to lead the way with a question either to Kent, or we've got our planner, Kent Scullion, on the call, our CAO, obviously Greg Bordas is here, as well as the 2 county planners. So if you have a question, direct it to who you think the most appropriate person is to answer. And if that person doesn't agree, then they can redirect it. Okay, Councillor Powers, go ahead, Nick.
Thanks, Mayor Taylor. I agree. Great report. Lots and lots of detail and work went into this. I'll start with a general question. In reading the table format of the information, there were a number of parts that were identified that had the line not in line or not outlined in current OP, but a welcome addition. So I saw that in a number of cases. When I then transferred over to the report, those welcome additions, I would say, aren't necessarily articulated in the report as the recommendation that they be incorporated. So I just wanted some clarity around where we're saying we would take in whole, for example, on-farm diversified use. There are a couple of cases there where it's a welcome addition to ours, for example. I'm just curious, Kent, if maybe you're the best person to speak to that. Are you recommending that we add where you have the term a welcome addition be included in our sort of OP response to the county?
Through the mayor to Councillor Powers, I wouldn't. I think when I was saying that, or when we were saying welcome addition, that was more of, we were thinking about how it could possibly be integrated. But ultimately what happened was, when we went through everything as a whole, we thought, well, I think it makes more sense, or we think it makes more sense to just simply have everything rather than trying to pick and choose. And I think that that's really how it's set up. I think that when we were looking at that, we thought, well, that could be a good addition to our policies, or perhaps a good addition to our policy. However, when it came down to it, when we saw it as a whole, we thought, well, it's probably just best to have everything notwithstanding, and then have everything separate.
Okay, all right, I can appreciate that. And just a follow-up question, if I can, Mayor Taylor, is I'm in general agreement with the work that we have done on ROPs, trying to incorporate those where you've identified cannabis and on-farm diversified use. I think we've done quite a bit of work there, and it would make sense that if they aren't truly in alignment, I would agree with that we continue to use the work that we've done in our OPAs and include those in the county OP moving forward. One of the questions that did come up that I did sort of highlight is the recommendation around the hamlet designation, the switching from 4 to 5. I'm just curious, can you help me understand, what is the term land holding? What does that mean? So if I've got 5 acres or 14 acres, or I've got 100 acres in a hamlet designation, does that differentiate the 4 versus the 5? I'm just curious for clarification.
So through the mayor, so land holding is a conveyable piece of land, essentially. So a piece of land that's in separate ownership from adjacent lands, and it could be any size, whatever size it is at present. And the land holding identification is key to determining the number of consents that a property is eligible for. So if you have a land holding as of the date of that, the OP, or as of the eligibility dates that are in the OP, then that's considered the land holding, and the number of consents that land holding is eligible for are the 4. So you could take sever 4 lots from that particular land holding. So it's a conveyable piece of land that exists, essentially.
Okay. All right.
I don't know if I don't know if Ian or Keziah wants to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I guess I'll elaborate on my question, and the 4 versus 5, because where I'm curious on is if I have, let's just say 25 acres and it's all zoned hamlet, if we are in the, helping develop new land holding, not land holdings, but, residential properties in the designated areas, which hamlets would be one, I guess my fear was by us reducing that amount, if I've got 25 acres or 50 acres in a hamlet designation, I now reduce the amount of growth potential that I could have in my hamlet, unless I'm interpreting that wrong.
So through the mayor, so it doesn't do that. So there's essentially two ways to divide land, or one and a half or 2.5 ways to divide land. You got consent for severance, or plan of subdivision, or condominium. And so when we're saying that there's a limit to five lots or 4 lots, that's simply by consent severance. It's not through plan of subdivisions. Plan of subdivision, you're not limited in terms of how many lots you could create. So that 14-acre parcel could be fully developed through a plan of subdivision or a plan of condominium. However, it is limited in terms of the number of severances that could be taken from the lot, because once you get above that number, the development is a lot more, from a technical standpoint, needs to be evaluated a lot more fulsomely, or through greater technical analysis, and the assembly of land should go through that process of, or the division of land should go through the process of plan of subdivision. Consent for severance, it's a consent creates 1 lot, and what we want to see through consent is we want to see infill situations where people can infill, rounding out of existing development. That's where we want to see severances occur in the hamlet. When we want to see larger scale development, we want to see it through plans of subdivision, and that limitation in terms of the number of consents does not limit someone from going through subdivision process or condominium process. Does that make sense?
It's just a
Yeah, that's
trigger.
good.
It's
Yeah.
just a trigger for anything over, in ROP, anything over 5 requires a plan of subdivision. Up to 5
All right.
individual consents. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I know that Keziah, you had your hand up. Did you want to supplement some of the information there?
I was going back to the original land holding date. So just through the land holding in the current draft official plan for South Nottingham is a legal parcel of land as it existed January 1st, 1998. And as Kent explained, that whole land holding definition wouldn't apply for a plan of subdivision.
Right, okay, thank you. So Nick, did that clear that up for you? Good, thank you. Okay, I see Bonnie's hand up. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, through the mayor, and thank you for the report. And I'm switching back and forth between the report and your timetable here as well, Kent. So just speaking to the on-farm diversified uses, and you had mentioned that there is a problem with farm business registration numbers. I understand that that is going into the county official plan. I just want for the rest of council, and maybe Ian or Keziah can speak to this, the Peterborough County Federation of Agriculture did contract Margaret Walton. She is a well-noted planner in agriculture right across the province of Ontario. In fact, has done LEARs for several municipalities as well. And she certainly, in her recommendation and the paper that she put forward that the PCFA fully endorsed, was that farm business registration numbers should be inclusive. And also, she was quite against having on-farm accommodations as well. So I guess I'd ask Ian and Keziah maybe to speak to that, but also ask Kent, when we are considering to have lodgings for people, are we getting a rezoning when we have overnight accommodations? If it was outside, say a you know, you live with the family and you have breakfast and you know, are part of the farming process and you're actually within the home. I mean, that's different. I'm talking about possibly standalone accommodations.
That was directed, I think, at Kent, was it?
Do
Yeah,
we-
Mayor Taylor, I think the first part was to Ian Keziah. I don't know if they
Okay.
want to handle that
Okay.
first.
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor, I can jump in here. So, as you know, we had a TAC that was made up of the planning people with each municipality, as well as 2 First Nations, and we went through all the policy review. And it was felt strongly with the other local municipalities that they did want the farm registration in there. The OFDUs, it's such a new animal, and there's so many considerations to be had, and so many sort of, I don't know, I want to use the word fears, but everybody has concerns over how it may be implemented, and you know, once you open the gate, no pun intended, but have you let the horse out, right? So most of the municipalities want to see that farm registration number to know that the use was taking place on an actual farm. And, you know, as we committed to the municipality, when you went through your own OPA to create non-farm diversified use OPA, we said that, you know, you could jump and come up with what we prepare in the county OP as far as the TAC is developed, or if you want to continue on with you know, your own policies that you've created. So we did have a good discussion with your staff a couple of weeks ago on sort of, you know, the differences. They are, I think, somewhat subtle, the differences, but there was a lot of work that went into your OPA. And you know, if the municipality wants to go forward with the policy environment that you currently have, at a staff level, we would be supportive of putting that in specifically for Otonabee-South Monaghan, if that's council's wish.
Okay, thanks.
If I may just follow up, Mayor Taylor.
Go ahead.
I certainly would like that, and I don't know whether I make a motion to that to see where the rest of council. I am basing this on Margaret Walton's opinion from Planscape, which is endorsed by the whole PCFA board, who endorsed it and sent it into the county. So if we are listening to our rural people on this, I think that's certainly a consideration. So I would make a motion that we do an addition to our policy that we have in place to include a farm business registration number.
Okay, I don't have a problem with that, but just let me reflect over to staff here and process, because there may be a number of areas where there are recommended changes, or we recommend a status quo and would change the county's draft OP somewhat.
Mayor Taylor, if you would like me just to table that to the end.
Well, let me just find out now what staff recommends here. Would we just simply have staff receive these comments and continue discussing the county, understanding what council's position is? Or Heather or Greg, do we need a motion dealing with each separate issue if there's going to be a change from what we have? What's the best way to deal with this?
Mr. Mayor, I can speak to it. I guess in what we tried to do is to sort of take the simplest path forward. So we provided council with some recommendations and some options here. And with regard to the OFDU, is that we went through a whole public process. And so we felt that it was probably just the most straightforward to have the OFDU come to go to the county under a non-withstanding clause, because it had already gone through the public vetting process. So that was part of the conversation we had. So we're looking for council here in all these particular items to, you know, ultimately we need to make a recommendation to the county. We're making a recommendation to council in the report here. If there was any deviations from those recommendations, they would have to be dealt by specific motions that I believe,
Okay.
Heather, that we would probably do.
Okay, so we can, if certainly if we receive the report and approve the recommendations, that's fine. The recommendations are very, very clear. But if there's something this council decides to deviate from a recommendation, it should require a separate motion. Okay,
Okay, fair enough. And I'm just asking for an addition, certainly not a complete deviation from the work that was done. And then if I may, my follow-up, and then I'll give the floor to someone else before I continue. Kent, on our on-farm diversified use, if there was overnight accommodations, do we require a zoning bylaw for that? Could you expand? Because I'm just trying in my own mind to get my head around that.
Sure, through the mayor, to Deputy Mayor Clark, we wouldn't require a zoning bylaw amendment, and we permit overnight accommodation. It's obviously limited in certain ways, and I can't recall specifically what they are. I'd have to see it, but we do allow overnight accommodation, and that was something that we had extensive discussions with stakeholders and the public about. I guess just to briefly go over the reasoning, there were a number of uses in the township, or existing businesses in the township, that were looking for opportunities to have, as part of their on-farm diversified use, offer some sort of accommodation with the on-farm diversified use experience. And that was the reasoning behind that. And we found that our opinion was that the policies and the provisions that we provided were certainly restrictive enough that it wouldn't go beyond something to the extent of like a hotel or a motel or that sort of thing. It would be similar to like a bed and breakfast, but sort of like an extension of that, where it's a permitted and accessory structures and things of that nature. So the answer is no, it's not required as a zoning bylaw amendment.
So if I just may follow up to that, we don't have a solid number attached to that. And again, I will reiterate Margaret Walton's, stating this is a slippery slope here. And that was fully endorsed by the Peterborough County Federation of Agriculture, with a very, very intensive look at this and consultation. So a little bit concerned with that. But
Okay.
anyway, that's fine. As you say, a rezoning is not required. And according to her, that is a slippery slope. So
what I want to be careful about here, Council, is we have provisions in our OP that we collectively, based upon decisions made by council, and sometimes after a great deal of time and effort and discussion. And the OFDU is one of them. Now, if we want, I'm not going to get into starting to rewrite the whole thing here. That's not at all what this exercise is about. But if there are minor adjustments, this is the time when we should make them known. So Deputy Mayor has suggested perhaps a minor adjustment to our OFDU could be including the provision that they only be applied to farms that have a farm registration number. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all ask Kent, why did we not decide? Because we had a great conversation about that. Why did we not do it? And then I'm going to ask council whether they want to stay with what we have or add that amendment and send it forward. And that will be done with a motion. So Ken, what's the answer to that question?
Mr. Mayor, I don't know if there's necessarily a straightforward answer. I think the idea was that we were focused on, I think I've said this before at the previous meetings where we've discussed this, that we were focused on the use rather than the user. And I think that we weren't that focused on trying to determine, what was going on the farm and that sort of thing. It was more so, is it being farmed? And if they can provide us with that information, however they provide it, whether it's with a farm, a business registration number or something else, some other sort of evidence, that was sufficient for us. We weren't specifically pointing to a specific piece of evidence.
Okay, all right, fine, thank you. So Deputy Mayor, I do want to move on. You are suggesting that council, I think you're forth a motion that.
I will make a motion that we put
Go
an
ahead.
addition of requiring a farm business registration number for our OFDU.
As it gets transferred, and that, of course, won't take effect unless and until it gets transferred into the county, right?
Correct.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Howie. Discussion on the motion. Seeing no discussion, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor of that motion? Hands up, please. That motion is carried. Okay, so that'll be one of the changes that will be proposed into the draft county OP from ours, okay? I think in an effort to move this along, I'm just going to go through them one by one, and we'll read the comment. If there's any changes such as we've just made, council can request it. If not, then we just simply accept the recommendation. Cannabis production and processing. The recommendation is that the county include the township's cannabis policies as township-specific policies in the draft county OP. Any deviation from that recommendation? So this council is suggesting that we ask the county to include our township policies in the draft county OP, correct? That's the recommendation? Okay. Secondary units. The recommendation is take no action as the draft county OP appropriately reflects the township's policy. Sounds good? Home-based business, same thing. Draft county OP accurately reflect our policies. Major land user infrastructure policies, same thing. Resort commercial requirements. The recommendation is take no action. Can't explain that, I think, fairly adequately. Urban fringe. There is a slight request there for the county to include some areas, including specifically the Cold Springs. Any questions to Kent or any suggestion otherwise? Deputy Mayor, go ahead, Bonnie.
Just through the mayor. So a question about this urban fringe. I'm looking at it outside a larger body, meaning the city of Peterborough, because you refer to Cold Springs. Is an urban fringe, because then I look at the other side and we are looking at Safe Harbor. Is that also considered an urban fringe? I just need some clarification on that. Do we have more than one urban fringe, I guess is the question.
So through the mayor to deputy mayor, the urban fringe policies that I'm referring to are specific to the Cold Springs area. So the south of Peterborough, not the Safe Harbor, Television Road area. And we're not suggesting that there would be any inclusion of policies specific related to that area other than what's there now.
And I'm fine with that. If I may, through the mayor, I'm fine with that. I just wonder how we determined it was just Cold Springs. Is that because we've had an agreement before with the city around that area, or how do we land on that?
Through the mayor, it's simply because that's what we have in the OP right now.
Oh, okay.
It's to reflect, and we're trying to reflect what's already in there. And that's really what we're trying to do with this whole thing is just to ensure that those are continued on if they're necessary.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just needed there's Ian.
Go ahead, Ian.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just a bit of the history there that I think predates Kent's involvement at the township. But you recall when there was the annexation that took place with Cold Springs in the city of Peterborough, and there was a negotiation
Right.
to allow for servicing over at the Safe Harbor site. And so one of the conditions of the annexation was that the city did want to see in around the Cold Springs area, they did want to see some some policy context to sort of protect the urban fringe area in that particular location. And so that's why it's only identified in that location.
Very good, Ian. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Thank
I remember it well. Actually, you know, council, you will recall any land planning applications that come before us that are in that Cold Springs area, the city is circulated on them and always comments on them. So that's why it's in there. It's part of that annexed area, and the city wants to be involved in our business. So we've got to make sure that we keep some control over it. So the recommendation is to include the urban fringe policies for Cold Springs area. Any concern with that? I think personally, I think it's very important that we do that. Okay. The hamlet policies. The recommendation is the county include the parkland dedication with section 3.5. Every township has their own parkland dedication policy. We have ours. And certainly it needs to be included. Any concern with that? The hamlet consent policies. This was a question that Councillor Powers had earlier. Go ahead, Nick.
So just a question not related to the 4 versus 5, but the water assessments and hydrological assessments, water capacity, I mean. My only fear here is we're going to be overly, we could constrain future development by having water capacity tests every time we have a new house. I'm curious what other municipalities are doing in similar situations. Is it every single house has to do a water capacity test? I would think that on some level we could do a water capacity test and know that we have the ability to hold X amount of residential properties before, you know, we reach a capacity. I'm just trying to limit the expense to future homeowners within our township, and having them do a water capacity test every time we have a new house come in. I'm just curious if it's overly aggressive and whether or not it's necessary.
I see Greg. Greg, did you want to tackle that or?
Sure, and I can then have Kent as well, but the reason this was put in is that you know, with having a well for each of these particular homes, the whole matter of access to water has been so hit and miss, and so this is what why the requirement was put in place to have a hydro G study for each of these particular properties, because you could have one property and then you could go 500 meters down the road and have another property and they can't access water. So it's been really a difficult item, and I believe this is why this was put in, so that you can ensure that they had a source of water for each of these new severed lots that they were going to be placed in that. And I believe that was the
First of all, this is just in the hamlet designation. This is not for rural services. Okay. Kent, you had something
Yeah,
else?
and just to follow up on that, Mayor Taylor, to Councillor Powers, this wouldn't apply to existing lots of record. So they have development rights. So if someone were to construct a dwelling on an existing lot, they don't have to demonstrate that. It would be for simply if you're creating a new lot. And the reason we would ask for it every time is because of the limitations with the servicing systems that we have in place in those in Keene and Stewart Hall. There are limitations to their capacity right now. Like and so that changes. I mean, it could change. It's hard. It can be hard for us to keep track in certain situations. So I think that it's important that it's imperative that the applicant look at this first, and or at least confirm with us. We do have that information as we're moving along, and it could very well be just simply a letter from an engineer that confirms with, you know, Public Works that this is what the capacity is now. There's capacity for this lot, and that's simply all it needs to be. It doesn't have to be too much of an intensive study. when it comes to water capacity, determining municipal water capacity. So that's the reason for that. It can be a bit of a moving target. So we just want to ensure that we're not hitting that capacity, with each severance that we approve.
Right, yeah, and I guess I can appreciate that, and to Greg's point in terms of the wells, I can appreciate if we're looking at individual wells, and you're going to have 3, 4, whatever lots that are being created with new residential properties on those things. Yeah, then a hydrological assessment may be required. That seems logical. I was more concerned about the water capacity assessment when we're putting people onto the municipal system, where they were now be forced to pay for a water capacity assessment, I guess you could say, another fee to have the assessment done, where it would seem logical to me that we would know that in advance, that we can have 5 more houses or 100 more houses. I guess I'm just trying to I'm being the devil's advocate a little bit here to say, is that a fee that's actually required, that we would already know what that capacity is? But, and I don't know what the expense is. I'm just thinking outside the box in terms of, if I'm an applicant, wouldn't we already know how much the system can hold?
Kent, first of all, correct me if I'm wrong, but a hydro-G study for a cluster of lots in the Hamilton designation would be paid for by the developer. It would be required before the severances could even occur. It would likely be a condition of consent. So the individual homeowners that purchase those lots, now that cost is going to be transferred onto them for sure, but it would be the developer that would pay for it, not the individual lot owners. It would be required before consent occurs. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, Mr. Mayor, it is correct.
So,
yeah.
So does that help at all, Nick, with the concern?
Yes and no. I guess ultimately I'm fine if we want to move forward this. I'm just trying to make sure that we're not creating an expense for development when we already know the information at hand is my concern. And so having an assessment done to say how much capacity do we have in our municipal water system to add this one house or these 2 houses would seem to me that that's not an assessment charge that the individual would need to pay for, is my thinking, because we would have that information at hand at any given time. We get capacity reports on an annual basis. So it's more, I guess I'm confused why we would ask someone to pay for that. That's all. But if council is of the opinion and staff that this is something that we should do, and we should have it as an assessment as part of new additions to our water system, that each one has to pay for an assessment of our water capacity, then I'm fine. I'm just more concerned that it seems redundant.
I would just add through the mayor that it's like I said, it's a moving target as we go along throughout the year. There may be additions to the system or increased usage in the system that relating from existing lots of record or changes in use that are permitted and things like that. So I think it is important, given the limitations of these systems. They're not big systems, and I think that given those limitations, and that's why that's in there, that we want to be sure that with each of these applications, and as I said, it's not really a big ticket item, but we do want to we want the applicant to ensure that they provided us that information, or we want to have that information. We want the applicant to provide that. So.
Okay, Deputy Mayor has been waiting patiently. Go ahead, Bonnie.
So just to follow up on that, and I'm glad through the Mayor, Kent, that you clarified existing lots are exempt from this. So we're looking at, and when you say it's not a big cost, can you give me a ballpark? Is it a couple $1,000s?
Yeah, through the mayor, it could be in the form of a short letter. It wouldn't be more than a couple thousand. And actually, Keziah is actually bringing something up here, that the that it's at the discretion, and we should clarify that it is actually at the discretion of the municipality in terms of what they want to see. So it could be simply just a confirmation email from someone. It could be that the municipality does it, in conversation with a representative from the applicant. So I think that with the flexibility that's provided in that policy, it's a minimal cost in terms of determining what that would be.
Yeah, and I support that because we have to do our due diligence. We've had so many summers where we have people have carted water out of Peterborough. I see trucks go by here that I think that's just doing our due diligence. So then coming back, as Councillor Powers said, we do get a report from Aqua about our capacity, but don't forget we've got what I'll call it the reservoir that's there, that maybe we have volumes and volumes of water, but the capacity lies within our system. We don't have a big system, and therefore we can't put the volume out that say 100 houses would need or 50. We would have to buy a bigger and grander system. So there's a couple of things at play there. There's the volume that's in the ground that we have access, but we also have to make sure that we've got the equipment to deliver it to the people as well.
Okay, so certainly there's a difference between a capacity study and a full-blown hydro-G study, and council, we have all been in the position where the first concern that's brought forward for any further additions onto a water system is capacity. The residents who are there want to be ensured that it's not going to compromise their water. So that's really what Kent is suggesting here. And I see it being safe. If we say may, we're putting ourselves into a difficult position. If we say shall, then it's on the line. If you're going to be tapping into the water systems, you need to make sure the water's there. So the recommendation is that the county include the water and hydro-G requirements of the current Otonabee-South Monaco official plan, and that the policy be altered to require water capacity studies with all severance applications in Keene and Stewart Hall. In other words, in our two water systems. Is council comfortable with that? Okay, sounds good. Just a little housekeeping matter, council. Councillor Allen, it looks like I don't know whether he's just dropped off the meeting or he's lost signal or what, but if you have to step aside at all, please advise the clerk, use the chat function and advise the clerk, because she captures that in the minutes. So-and-so left the meeting for a period of time and come back. Now, Deputy Mayor Clark left the meeting for 30 seconds earlier to get a cough drop. and Bonnie was good enough to send me the chat, and I appreciate that.
And I could hear through the mayor. I could hear every word. So you didn't
leave the meeting, and that's fine. But my point is there, and I appreciate the chat. The point is, send it to the clerk, and then she'll know whether you're actually still in the meeting or if you have left. Because I guess Heather, you have no choice now but to let the minutes reflect that Councillor Allen left the meeting. And I don't know. We don't know for sure if that's the case. So it really helps the clerk and helps all of us if you need to do that. Thank you. Okay, moving down now to rural consent policies. This was interesting. Council, I can provide a little, just like Ian said, Kent, you weren't back when the urban fringe policy was being drafted. I can provide a little insight into this one. Many years ago, Township of Otonabee-South Monacan had a consent policy with a 25-year waiting period. You were allowed one severance every 25 years in a rural designation, to a maximum of 3. We changed, that was very restrictive, and we got a lot of pushback from it. It had been in place for quite some time. So we changed it from 25 to 5 years in an effort to control growth, so that we thought that every 5 years that would give us an opportunity to see where the severance occurred, how it affected the area, whether another severance 5 years later would be okay or not. And so that's why we put the 5-year time frame in. Now, if council decides that that's no longer necessary, I actually have no problem with that. But that's why the 5-year time is in there. Ian, if I'm not mistaken, several townships have waiting periods between consent applications. Is that not correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, there are a few municipalities, because I might be able to speak to it a little better if those are being retained. But you know, when I look at this policy, it's one of those ones where I tend to scratch my head. Like if a property is eligible for severance, you know, the severance runs with the property, runs with the land, not with the owner. And so if a property is eligible now for 2 severances, you know, people can get their 2 severances and be done. I think what you run into sometimes is if you split the severance eligibility apart by a date like this of your 5 years, is that now the logical location, like maybe those 2 lots should have been created side by each, right? And now you've got a house on the one lot that was created 5 years ago, and now they don't want a house beside them. And so now you're sort of fragmenting the frontage, or you might be going into a new field that could, you know, ultimately have been protected a little bit if the 2 severances were granted at the same time and sort of side by side in a certain location. So it is sort of, I call this a legacy policy. It's I know it's been around for a while, but as a land use planner, I kind of scratch my head about its real use, to be quite honest with you. So
Fair enough. Kent?
Yeah, and I would just add to, I agree with what Ian's saying, as I had said in the report. And it sounds to me, Mayor Taylor, that the original policy was sort of intended to be like an eligibility date policy. And then it was compressed down to 5 years, but that doesn't necessarily, the eligibility dating doesn't serve any purpose, because we have a date for a land holding, which is as of 1998. So you know, if you have a land holding that's in existence as of January 1st or whenever it is, 1998, you're eligible for the 2 severances. So I think that in itself controls provides that growth control in the rural areas that you're looking for. And as Ian said, it makes more sense to just have them, if somebody is eligible for the 2 and they want to get the 2 at the same time, you can evaluate them at the same time. And you can certainly evaluate it, against the other one if they decide not to do it for 2 years or 1 year. You know, you have that opportunity with each consent application to judge it on its own merits.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you. And so the recommendation is that we drop the waiting period. You're still limited to your 3 severances, but there's no time has to occur between the 3. Councillor Powers, go ahead, Nick.
You just answered my question in terms of the limitation on number of severances and whether or not there was a change. Thank you.
We're not changing that at all, correct?
Through the mayor to Ian, I believe that I think that the current limitation is 2 though in rural areas. It's 2 plus 1.
2 plus a retained.
Right, and that carries over into the draft OP. I would point out though that, and we've talked about this before, is that the incoming agricultural system and natural heritage system will provide its sort of own limitations in terms of what you can and can't do in the rural areas. So, that in itself will be a limiting factor for eligibility ultimately. Policy.
Very restrictive, right? Deputy Mayor, go ahead, Bonnie.
Yes, and just to follow up to Kent's comment, that it is 2, and that is post 1998, correct?
Yeah.
So the recommendation, Council, is that we don't need to take any action because the draft county official plan policies reflect the policies of the Otonabee-South Monaghan. And that is in that 5-year time, that 5-year waiting period will be removed, correct? Okay, Council comfortable with that?
Correct.
Am I, is that a mistake? Am I mistaken there? Or is that exactly what the intent of this recommendation is?
Yeah, yes, Mayor Taylor, yes, it is the recommendation, yeah.
Thank you. Is this existing residential designation Take no action as the existing designation is not necessary and does not reflect modern planning policy. There's no such thing as residential designation. We have rural residential. But we don't need to include that. Any problems with that? Community improvement areas, the draft county OP will appropriately be updated by county staff. And it will reflect community improvement areas in the draft plan, correct?
That's correct.
Every township has them. Okay. Temporary use bylaws. This is an interesting one. We have used temporary use bylaws in Otonabee-South Monaghan on, I can think of 4 or 5 occasions over the past few years. And frankly, they've been very helpful. Now you use them sparingly and you can only use one. If you've got a temporary use bylaw in place now, we can't grant another one next month until that was lifted. That was the way it was drafted. But I actually think that they have their use at times. So the recommendation is that the draft county OP will be updated to include temporary use bylaws in at least Otonabee-South Monaghan. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's my understanding. I'll put the in.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that was an oversight. It is a land use planning tool that should be recognized in the official plan that allows all the municipalities to use that land use tool. So it's purely an oversight, and thanks to Kent for identifying it. And so the draft is being revised to add that so that all the municipalities can use that tool should they wish.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, so that really brings us to the bottom of the report. So there was, I think there was really only just the one. Well, there was a couple of changes, but they were included in the recommendations. So we don't need separate motions for that. We had a separate motion to deal with the farm business registration number. Other than that, I think council have agreed with the recommendations that are contained in the report. Councillor Powers, go ahead.
Yeah, just a point of clarification around how the OP will be sort of represented in terms of what we've talked about this evening. Kent, I think you alluded to the fact there would be a notwithstanding clause identified within the OP that would say, okay, here is the county OP, notwithstanding, here's the township portion of the OP. So is that how it's sort of going to be written, which is we may have things that are similar and then there'll be unique and distinct parts to ours that'll just be identified and individuals will be redirected to that part of the OP. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, yes, that is correct. Essentially, there may be opportunities for simply just adding on, like for instance, the parkland dedication policies. I mean, and I leave this obviously with the county and their capable hands in terms of how it'll be set up. But you know, that something like that could simply just be an additional subsection in the hamlet designation or in another section, or in some cases it might be notwithstanding, see a separate section for Otonabee-South Monaghan policies and that sort of thing.
Right. Okay.
So how this works, council, is that these comments and these recommendations, these requests will be incorporated into the draft county official plan. And that is hopefully going to be sent to the province for review sometime this summer. I think in July is hopefully the time frame. And then it will take some time for the province to review it. They will have comments. They will come back for clarification to the county. They may even want some things changed. And that's not knowing what's going to happen with the provincial election. If there's a change in government, there could be some significant policy changes that have to be incorporated. So in a conversation with county planning staff, it's unlikely that the county official plan will finally be ready for approval after the provincial review in 2022. It's likely to happen sometime in 2023. In the meantime, our official plan still is in full force and effect, and planning applications are dealt with by the planning approvals in place at that time. So our official plan won't be part of the counties until the counties is approved, and that will not likely be for, we don't know how long, 6, 7, 8, 9 months. Ian, is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, for the most part. So just for clarification, so the draft that we have prepared, like a draft has already been sent off to agencies in the province and to all municipalities, posted on our website for review by the public. We have a report that's going to be going forward, I think, to the next council meeting that Kazai has been working on. So we're going to take your comments. We're going to roll that into the next draft. And so when we have our required public meeting that will be happening, everybody will see the most current draft. We've had comments come in from all the municipalities on sort of tweaks and changes. I'm happy to report that all of them were relatively minor. There was no real extensive issues with the plan. A lot of the comments were similar to what you've had tonight, were just minor tweaks, or we prefer that our existing policy be captured that's only applicable to our municipality. So it's been a fairly positive exercise. But we have to have this, according to legislation, we have to have the new official plan adopted by July 1st. And then we send the adopted document off to the province. And this is what you've been referring to, Mr. Mayor, is they then go through their review process. Typically, if they have any issues or need clarification, they will send a letter back to us asking for clarification. They may even provide us with a list of proposed modifications to see if we are willing to accept them. A lot of times it's a lot of wordsmithing back and forth to say, well, we don't necessarily like your wording. How about we give you a different suggested wording? But yeah, as you mentioned, you and I had talked a couple of weeks ago. I wouldn't anticipate that the plan is, I would be surprised if the plan is ultimately approved by the province this year. As you know, the city, they adopted theirs, I think just before Christmas last year, if I recall. We're already heading into May. So, you know, it's been up there about 5+ months, and I'm not sure where it's at as far as their approval. So you've got a number of municipalities that are heading towards adoption for this July 1st date. And so the MSO office in Kingston is probably going to have 3, 4, 5 of these official plans sitting in front of them for approval, and having to go through a really extensive review to make sure that all the provincial legislation is caught. So it's, as you mentioned, your OP is still in full force and effect until we go through that process. So you're in good hands still.
Thank you very much, Ian. I'll just one more comment, then we'll turn it over to our CAO and our deputy mayor, and then we'll wrap this up. But Ian, you probably don't remember this because it was quite a few years ago, but you and I were having a conversation about a particular policy that was being drafted. And I said, it just seems to be impossible to draft a policy that anticipates every situation, covers every scenario perfectly every time. And your comment at the time was, I haven't seen the perfect policy written yet, and I don't think I ever will. And it's true.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm sure Kent, and I know Keziah could speak to this too. You watch the second, well, your current official plan that you have now, or this new one, there will be something that comes forward the day after it gets approval, and we'll all go, boy, we never thought of that. And that's why we do housekeeping amendments and you know, capture those things. So it's a massive document, and you can't expect you're gonna nail it 100%. I don't know anybody that ever has, so it's just a reality of what it is. Yeah,
that was the point you made, Ian, and I remember it well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to, I guess, just a summary here. So, you know, upon council's passing a resolution to pass these comments onto the county, you know, Keziah and Ian asked, their original time frame was, could we have our comments into the county by April the 25th? Was their original time frame that they asked us for after council made the decision in March. So we're really pleased that by the work that Kent and Ken and Ian and Keziah have done in order to get us to here to this particular date. Council will see a notice. I think Keziah, you sent it out today, advising of the public meeting taking place for May the 18th. So just that council is aware of the public meeting that the county would be looking to have for their statutory public meeting of May the 18th. So I just sort of share that information, Mr. Mayor, and then look forward to having the council and endorsement to resolution to send it off to the county.
Very good, thank you. And let the record show that we made our April 25th deadline. Last comment, Deputy Mayor, we're going to move on. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Yes, through the mayor. So I'm certainly supportive of this and the recommendations. The one change I would, and thanks to the staff for all the work. This is absolutely huge and one of the more important things that we do, as we've said before. We've had a lot of discussion around settlement areas and serving those and cautionary. And I wondered if you would be kind enough to put out to all of council, just in the OFDU uses, what would trigger a zoning around? Is there a tipping point? So don't need to speak to that tonight, but just give me a little bit of insight. I want to know exactly what would tip that in that direction.
Maybe Bonnie, if you could contact Kent tomorrow,
Yes.
and with your concerns or questions, and that can be addressed. Okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I will go that route and share it with the rest.
So
Yep,
for
thank
tonight,
you.
council, first of all, I also would like to thank everybody who's been involved here. Thank you to Ian and Keziah for attending tonight and for the continuing work you're doing on this. Our staff have been bombed with it. It's a big undertaking. It's a huge initiative, but it's really important. It deserves the time that it's getting. So thank you. It's nice to feel that it's being looked after by a bunch of very competent professionals, and I look forward to the final result sometime in the future. But for now, I'd like a motion, please, that we receive the report from our planning consultant, that we approve the recommendations with the one change that council has already decided. I see Councillor Powers and Councillor Howie are willing to make that motion. Discussion on the motion, questions? Call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Okay. We're going to move on now. This is why council, you'll see at 6:32. That's why we started at 5 o'clock. We thought that this particular topic could take a while.
Thanks for having us.
Staff reports.
Thank you, everyone.
Staff reports. We've got Craig with the Public Works activity report, and Craig's been waiting patiently. Go ahead, Craig.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yes,
You're muted, Craig.
sorry, I must have double clicked. Everyone hear me? Okay, great. So the Public Works activity report is focused around a couple things that have come out of the Roads Committee meetings over the last several months, and of course what was mentioned earlier tonight about a motion that was put forward at a council meeting. So the report is focused around looking at possible speed reductions on two sections of road within Otonabee-South Monaghan. The first one is baseline between Keene Road and Heritage Line. Second one was Lakeview Road, and that was between County Road 2 and Nicholson Road. So the first thing I just wanted to highlight, and I know everyone's read over the report, was just some of the considerations in terms of taking a systematic approach to the way we look at different roads within the township and whether or not a speed reduction is warranted. Those things are identified, they're bullet pointed in the report as In particular with Baseline Road, the existing section of roadway that already has a speed reduction on it. There's also some geographic and geometric features to the road that needed to be considered, along with a natural wildlife corridor, high-risk intersection, and a small built-up area. As well, we had some information brought forward on speed surveillance and then traffic counts. So those were all looked at, and some background was provided within the report. And I think notably, some of the notable takeaways are traffic count. The traffic count for Baseline with that particular section of road, it was the highest annual average daily traffic count across the township for gravel roads, and that was 430. The other I think feature that was considered, or the other element that was considered, there was that we had an intersection, Drummond Line and Baseline, and it's a two-way stop with Baseline being currently being an 80 km/h zone through that intersection. And along with a wildlife corridor just to the east of that intersection, where we see all year round, quite frankly, several species, some migratory, some native to the area in the general vicinity of that roadway. So all of those things were collected in terms of information gathering and presented back to the roads committee, and that came there came discussion after that, and a recommendation ultimately that is put forward tonight. So a similar study, if you will, was done with Lakeview Road, and some of the things that were identified in terms of Lakeview Road were again geometric features, natural wildlife in the area, some small built up area at the western limit of that road segment, speed surveillance, which was not present in this section of roadway, but we did have traffic counts, and notably there were some road improvements done within the last 12 months on this section of road. So again, all of those elements were detailed in the report, and I think some of the more notable features or elements were definitely recognizing that the roadway is slightly undersized to the let's see, 0.5 width. So it's undersized by about 0.5 meters wide, which isn't too bad. There's the shoulder portion of the road is slightly undersized as well. The traffic counts in this area are 366 AADT, which is slightly higher than the average for surface treated road in Otonabee-South Monaghan. And notably the local improvements that we had made late last year in terms of some of the edging that we did to certainly open up the shoulders for any pedestrian traffic that may occur on that road piece. That was done, as well as some light brushing in the area. So ultimately, the recommendation that is coming out of this report is to reduce the speed limit on that Baseline segment between Keene Road and Heritage Line from 80 km/h to 60 km/h. There would of course be some cost to placing signs that would mark that new speed, and obviously staff time to put those signs up and material costs to post those signs. And I've also identified some ongoing costs in terms of maintenance. With respect to Lakeview Road, it was decided that there was further assessment required. So the recommendation or the action will be from Public Works will be to look at getting some speed surveillance set up with that. So I just wanted to make note of that from this report. So the financial impact to this speed reduction on baseline would be to post 22 signs and posts. And the cost is noted in the report, as well as installation, and that would be done by staff. And there would be a total cost of around $2,650. And the average life cycle for those types of signs is around 7 years on average. And it should be noted that a bylaw would have to come forward to council for approval to reduce the speed on that segment of road. We would, pending council approval, once that bylaw be passed, we would be able to place those signs up as soon as materials are ordered and everything's approved.
Okay, thank you very much, Craig. Ken, as chair of the roads committee, do you have any comment before I ask council if they have any?
Yeah, no, it was a good discussion that we had at the roads meeting. One of the questions I actually asked Craig there last week, we were very curious to know when the roads count was done on Lakeview. As part of the year has a lot of traffic when another part doesn't. So, and the other thing would be, how soon can we get the monitoring up? It is summertime now to monitor this traffic that's going through on Lakeview.
Okay, thank you. Council, this is just for your information. This was something that we brought, these two requests and others were something that we brought to our roads committee meeting in November. And Craig agreed to take a look at it, to bring forward the information and for us to make a decision at our February meeting. But our February meeting was canceled due to workload that was created primarily because of staff shortages at the time. So we agreed to defer the February meeting to April. And in the meantime, Craig did a pile of work, got a lot of information there for us. And so we were able to bring this issue forward to our April meeting, make a decision, and it's here for you tonight. It made no sense to the roads committee to have sections of baseline at different speeds. We just do the whole thing. My biggest concern personally was the baseline swamp. It's an important wildlife corridor. It's also a section of road that's closed at least 10% of the year, 15% of the year. And on a week or two on either side of that, it's barely passable. So it just made perfect sense. And we decided the roads committee, as you see, the recommendation was to close it right from Keene Road to Heritage Line, turn it into 60. So thank you, Craig, for the work you did on it. And Heather and Greg, we had a lot of, it was a great meeting, a lot of discussion. The other thing that, before I move on from that, the other thing that Craig was wondering about was scheduling a roads tour. And the roads committee certainly encouraged that, but we have to wait till I said, let's wait till we can at least all pile in the bus and not have to wear a mask. And I don't know when that's going to happen. So Craig is still thinking about it. He's trying to plan it. We just don't know about the timing. He'd like it to happen sooner than later so we can see some of the roads at their worst, is what he said. But work goes on, and we'll wait to see what the pandemic dictates to us. So turn it over now to Council Deputy Mayor. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Yes, through the mayor to Craig and staff, whoever was involved with this report. It is very comprehensive, every detail. I'm quite impressed by this too. We've got the cost down. We've got the time lifespan on the signs here. And just to bullet point all the surveillance, the traffic counts. So I am prepared to make the motion to go ahead with the recommendation and bring the bylaw back to our next meeting. So I will move that. You're muted.
Sorry about that. We'll take the
Yeah.
motion now. Deputy Mayor has moved to receive the report and approve the recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Howie is going to second it. Okay, now speaking to the motion, Nick, I hope that doesn't hamstring you at all. You had your hand up speaking to the motion.
No, it doesn't hamstring me. I was just going to make a comment that I thought the report was very well done. Lots of thorough information, top to bottom. The only thing I would ask is, in the future, when the roads committee does meet, if we could have like a similar, it doesn't have to be necessarily related to a speed reduction, but maybe a summary of what was discussed at the roads committee in the previous roads committee meeting. You'd mentioned that there was a meeting in November, but it would be helpful if we knew that there was topics being discussed at future or previous roads committee. That would be helpful just to see what's sort of top of mind at the roads committee.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know Heather takes minutes of it. Heather, are the minutes of the committee meetings forwarded to council?
No, but the last meeting will be on the next council meeting agenda.
The minutes of the last meeting. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Well, we'll certainly do that. We'll try to make sure that council is informed of what all committees are considering and doing. But you are right. There is residents will come to us and say, we'd like a speed reduction. We hear it all the time. Boy, there's a lot of information that goes into the decision. It's not just a matter of, I think the cars are driving too fast past my house. It's way more complicated than that. So Craig did a great job. We do have a motion on the floor, so we should actually limit the discussion until the motion is voted on. The motion by Deputy Mayor and seconded by Councillor Howie is to receive the report and approve the recommendations. That's simple. Call the vote. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving down to all the way to correspondence. You've got a motion here from Gravenhurst, a resolution from Gravenhurst that really council is telling us what they've done. They're not asking for anything, but what I will tell you is the county of Peterborough dealt with this, I think at our last meeting, Bonnie, or a couple of meetings ago.
Yes.
And the county passed a resolution to be forwarded to the ministry that the county of Peterborough's position was that floating accommodations should not be permitted, period, full stop. So the county's already done that. I guess I'll just ask, what does council wish to do with this particular piece of correspondence? Bonnie, your hand's up. Did you have a?
Actually, I'm sorry. I wanted to, through you, I wanted to ask Craig one question around roads, if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
Craig, you said that, these traffic counts and the one was 430, which was way above. What is our average, what would an average gravel road in Otonabee-South Monaghan usually see for a traffic volume? I'm just curious. And you don't have to answer that tonight. This.
Through you, Mayor Taylor, to Deputy Mayor Clark, I think, and don't quote me, I can approximate, it's probably around 200, but I can bring back a more definitive number.
Why don't in your next report, Greg, why don't you just simply put that information on there for us? That'll give you time to research it and we'll have the answer. Okay.
Yep, I can do that.
Okay. Greg, go ahead. Greg Bordas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so typically when these road counts are done, the council should be aware that it's a part of our roads needs study, but depends on what time that time of the year that those counts are taken. So Mr. Brooks can go back in and look at our roads needs study and advise what the average daily rates are from that particular study that would have been done in 2021.
Okay, thank you. All right, back to the town of Gravenhurst and the resolution about floating accommodations. What's council's wishes on this one? Go ahead, Councillor Howie.
Yeah, just a quick question on what do they classify as floating accommodations? You know, do they classify it as houseboats or do they classify
No.
it as, you know?
No, definitely not houseboats. You should have seen the pictures of some of them. They're pretty nice looking cottages built to be towed out, anchored offshore somewhere, and be rented out for periods of time. And so that's what we're referring to here. They're not houseboats. They are not at all what we were talking about. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Yes, and through the mayor, I watched Tourism Ontario speak on CTV News one morning and showed these cruisers, as the mayor had said. I imagine they're huge, the number of people they would sleep. And the concern is the wastewater with them, docking. There's a whole bunch of issues come with them. I think the county is on this, so to ask our staff to go further, I think it's kind of a duplication. Through the mayor, I would ask the mayor's opinion on that.
Oh, my opinion, we just received this. That's my
Yes,
opinion, but
I think it's been covered off by the upper tier, and I do feel the same unless council has other wishes.
we've got a couple of hands have shot up, so let's deal with the questions first, and then I'll look for a motion. Councillor Howie, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, just a quick question on, is that not controlled by Trent Severn? Maybe Greg might be able to even answer that. You know, as we don't have control over the water actually in our township in Trent Severn.
Mr. Mayor, I think the determination through the council, Howie, the determination is that's being, I guess, then the conversations that's being had is what's a vessel and what's not a vessel. And so these homes have been determined that because they're floating, that they've been dealing with, you know, there's no form of propulsion or anything of those types of things. So they're trying to get around those particular issues related to do they qualify or not as a vessel. And so this is what this particular work is being done here by Gravenhurst and some of the others, and they're determining that these are floating structures rather than a vessel. And so the vessels are actually handled through Transport Canada. And through the that's where the licensing comes forward in those particular items. So as far as Parks Canada is concerned, they may have the requirements where they require a permit. So you would have to have a permit to be on the waterway, and whether or not these particular structures are deemed to be eligible to receive permits since they're not a vessel. So that would be my take on it, Mr. Mayor.
There was a lot of concern. Building code exemptions don't necessarily apply on the water. Councillor Howie, they're not necessarily regulated by Trent Severn because not all of the lakes are on the Trent Severn waterway. So a lot of the inland lakes that aren't part of Trent Severn are concerned about it. Yeah, the county was quite clear. No, I'm not sure whether the province will accept that answer, but that was the position. Go ahead, Councillor Powers. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, you've answered my question, which was if I built a structure, took it out to Rice Lake, dropped an anchor, I don't think we have any jurisdiction to stop them. So
Nope. No.
it's not ours. So we can say we support it, but ultimately we can't stop it. Yeah.
No, but apparently the province can, and that's what they're just determined. Yeah. I think, Councillor Allen, did your hand go up earlier, Mark? Did you have a comment or a question?
No, I was just going to motion that we receive it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will gladly take that motion now. Councillor Allen has moved that we just received the correspondence from the town of Gravenhurst. Councillor Howie has seconded it. Call the vote. All in favor? Received. Thank you. Town of Gravenhurst, they've been very busy there. It's a motion about the Russian sanctions. What's council's? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I would like to support.
Deputy Mayor has moved to support that resolution. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Powers. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll just call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Halton Hills, build it right the first time. What would council like to do with that one? Councillor Powers, go ahead.
Since I'm not familiar with the National Model Building Code and then incorporating it into the Ontario Building Code, as much as I think it has merit, I don't know enough to say that that's a good thing or a bad thing. So I'd receive it for information.
Councillor Powers has moved to receive this. This was something actually that our chief building official talked about a few months ago, that he was aware of it. So Councillor Powers has moved to receive that resolution, and Councillor Allen has seconded it. Lay your hand up to second it, Mark. Okay. Discussion on it? Call the vote. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Information piece. This is simply our emergency management compliance results, which of course need to be shared with the township and then all of the residents. Any questions on it? It's for information only. Seeing none. Heather, we don't need a motion to receive the information. We do. Motion to receive the information package, please. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Allen. All in favor? Carried. Okay. I have nothing under other matters. Anybody got anything? Seeing none. We have no closed session. At exactly 6:56, I would like a motion to adjourn. Councillor Allen and Councillor Powers. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, council and staff. It's starting to rain quite hard outside right now, if you can hear it. So April showers, enjoy your evening. And 1 week from today, we have our next council meeting. And again, it'll be virtual. And we'll reassess after that to see how things are going. Good night, everybody.